Cocktail evangelist Jennifer here from Make and Muddle, and I am here tonight with my good friend Steph, who is in Boston, and we are doing the very first episode of the new podcast, which is called Spirit and Soul. And this is going to be a podcast that is going to be a little bit about spirits, a little bit about cocktails and mocktails, and a lot about connection and personal growth. So I really appreciate everybody being here today, taking a look at this new podcast format that we're doing. And we are starting tonight. We're going to talk, first of all, about Scotch whiskey. Steph, first of all, I want you to tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Stephanie, and I'm actually what I think of as a spreadsheet storyteller. I help people understand their finances through the idea of storytelling and helping them feel comfortable about this. I work in nonprofit, and people do not like to talk about money. They're really afraid of it. So I try to make it a little bit more accessible. And I think I have success in doing that because I'm, kind of also a creative. I'm an artist, and I enjoy just kind of tinkering on the weekends and making cool sculptures out of stuff like cardboard boxes.
I know
So
your most recent sculpture is amazing. The helmet. What that thing is unreal. That is
yeah,
crazy.
I'm super excited about that. Actually, I recently met an artist who's going to help me light it up with like these battery operated LEDs. He does work at like Coachella, and he's a Google engineer. And then there's also, I recently met a photographer. And so between the two of us, or the three of us rather, we're going to put together this whole paper mache Pallas Athena costume with like florals and lights. And I'm going to take it into a public space and invite people to put it on. Oh, my clock is about to ding. Thank you. Um, um, and I'm going to take it into public spaces and invite people to put it on and just show the power of that, wise warrior spirit. So that's the
I
plan.
love that so much. And then I need you to come to Louisville and bring it with you. So
Yeah, totes.
that's unreal. That's completely crazy to me. Okay. I can't wait to see it when it's completed. All right. We are starting tonight with a single malt scotch. I am having the Balvenie, the triple cask Balvenie, which is one of my very favorite scotches. I'm going to tell you about scotch here in just a second. Steph, what are you drinking tonight?
I'm drinking an Oban single malt Scotch whiskey that I poured when I visited Oban, Scotland. It's 11 years old, and it's delicious. I came home with about $300 Scotch easily, which is really
You
not
did
that much.
good,
I know. Like now looking back, I'm like, I should have doubled that.
right? I mean, you're not in Scotland that often, so
Nope, nope.
Okay, so
But yeah,
single malt scotch. Let's talk about scotch for just a second here.
yeah.
So, in the world of whiskeys, all scotch is whiskey, but not all whiskey is scotch, right? And whiskey, Whiskey, you add an E to whiskey if you live in a country that has an E in the name. So when we talk about whiskey from the United States, it has an E in it. When we talk about whiskey from Ireland, it has an E in it. When we talk about whiskey from Scotland, it does not. When we talk about whiskey from Japan, it does not. When we talk about whiskey from Canada, it does not. It's just the rule of thumb. If you have an E in your country name, then you have an E in whiskey, how whiskey is spelled. So you didn't know that, did you? Little fun fact for you. Okay, so this is how Scotch whiskey is made. So you you cannot call it Scotch if it is not from Scotland, okay? It can be a single malt from someplace else. It can be a single grain from someplace else, but it cannot be called Scotch if it is not from Scotland. It has to be they do the it has to be distilled there. So when we make scotch, it is from malted barley, okay? And when we malt barley, that means that we wet the barley and the humidity and the heat makes it germinate. And the minute that it germinates, we hit it with hot kiln air and stop the germination process. That germination process, though, carries an enzyme that helps whiskey go from, during the fermentation process, it turns sugars into alcohol. So it is a very essential part of the grain. It would not ferment as well, it would not distill as well if it were not malted. So that's the first thing about it. Next, they distill it at least 2 times. They're typically column stills, and then it goes into oak barrels. Now, in Scotland, they do not have to be new oak barrels. They are typically whiskey or cognac barrels or sherry barrels in some cases. And then it ages, it has to age at least 3 years for it to be considered Scotch. So there's your little 411 about Scotch. All the must have knowledge moving forward. Tell us about when you were in Scotland. I want to hear about that.
Yeah, we my partner and I took a trip up. We started actually in England. We drove up from London through Liverpool to the Isle of Arran, which is off the west coast of Scotland. There we toured the Lag distillery, and the Isle of Arran is a much smaller island, and it's mountainous and beautiful. And we ran into those Highland cows, and
You wanted to bring them home.
I was just completely in love. And we went back to the mainland from the Isle of Arran. We ended up driving up to Oban. We were not able to do a distillery tour because it was just packed, but I got to pour myself a bottle out of one of their aging casks that was on the floor. It's kind of one of the things that these distilleries do. We went to the Isle of Skye after that, and we toured there for several days. And while we were there, we went to the Talisker distillery, where I bought a lot more whiskey. And actually, the Isle of Skye is the location of a really amazing kind of mountainous, like on the east coast of the Isle of Skye. There's these gigantic towering rock formations called the Old Man of Storr. And if you get up super early in the morning, you can watch the sunrise over Scotland, if you climb to the top of this mountain. And it's just breathtaking. Just the views are amazing.
It's delicious.
And from there we drove to yeah. From there we drove to Loch Ness,
As
and
you
then
do
we
when
went
you're in Scotland, right?
to Edinburgh. Yeah,
So
you
good.
do.
I mean, you have
And
to
then
see
we
the
went to
lochs. It's
Edinburgh,
part of
and
what's so
then we
great
drove.
about Scotland. Yeah.
You do, yeah, absolutely. So it was a magical tour. We went from there. We went back down into England, and we toured through England as well. And I was there for nearly 3 weeks, and could have spent much longer.
Yeah. That's
So
always the way it is there.
highly recommended.
Oh, good. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm dying to do a whiskey tour in Scotland. When I was there last time, just did one or two distilleries. It wasn't a lot. And then but yeah, I'm definitely ready to go back. So part of this podcast is going to be about um the conversations that we have been having as women and friends and in sisterhoods for a number of years now. I feel like these kind of started like when the Me Too movement started. Like we really started to dig into, first of all of our history. So Steph and I went to college together. We were in the same theater program in college. So we definitely have some shared experiences there. But when all of that happened, there were a lot of conversations that were happening online about what everybody's experiences were while we were there. And it kind of like, it felt like the beginning of the end of the patriarchy a little bit. Like all of a sudden, we were done eating shit sandwiches. Like it was like, okay, we've been doing this a really long time. We've made this really okay for a really long time, and none of this is okay. And it's been this kind of brave new world, I think, moving forward, as women and in the world in general. And then, COVID hit. And when
Mm.
COVID hit, like the world turned upside down, right? To quote Hamilton. I mean, it was unlike anything we'd ever done before. And how we interacted as people completely changed. And we started to go online more, right? We were doing Friday night Zoom cocktail hours with friends, and we were, anything just to stay connected with humans and have interaction that wasn't with our spouse all the damn time, right? So this I think has this feels like that feels like when we really started talking about connection and what all of that really looked like and pulling apart what was important to us. And so I yesterday on TikTok I asked the question, what does connection look like? What does that look like for all of us? What does it look like for women? What does it look like for families? What does it look like for friends? What does it look like as a global community, right? So one of the founding principles of my business Make and Model is about connection, and it is about what happens when you over a good pour, right? And really what it's not about the alcohol. It could be insert anything there, right? What it is about carving out time to be one-on-one with somebody, or to be quiet, to be off of a device, to be with someone, making eye contact, having an actual conversation with somebody and sharing that energy with them, right? So
Yep.
so my question for you, Steph, is what does connection look like for you personally?
I want to answer that question by stepping backwards a minute and saying that heading into that timeline that you were just talking about with the Me Too movement, I think there were a lot of things that were happening there, but we were finally, in addition to all of the things that you mentioned, just recognizing where we were and being in this moment, right? And no longer accepting, well, many of us, and maybe this is just my lens on this, but there was just this recognition that, oh, this is it. This is my real life happening right now. And all of these things that I've made okay for so long, I'm no longer able to do that because I'm recognizing the weight that it puts on you. And that shared, I don't want to necessarily call it an awakening, but it is in its sense, right? It's like just a becoming. It's like a becoming in this moment, and that shared recognition in one another. For me, created this um, really profound gravitational pull almost towards my girlfriends in this moment, because we were all like, all of that weight, all of that realization was happening at the same time. So all of the things that we were hiding with shame or with avoidance or with, drinking or whatever it was that we were doing at the time. And that happened, of course, for me, it happened like I continued in some of those behaviors through the pandemic, but
Mhm.
but like I just started to feel like, oh, this really means like coming out from under that like mask, right? And so like the mask of like, I'm making it okay for you, person in my life, or as a recovering people pleaser, um it just started to
Same girl, same.
change,
Said
right?
every woman ever.
I flash my badge periodically. I'm like, Stephanie, recovering people pleaser, I'd like to ask you some questions.
You're amongst friends. Welcome, Steph. You're amongst friends.
Anyway, so I guess I feel like that just recognition and reality was a really critical component, because it was no longer acceptable to continue to live in this way that I was accumulating all of these um I don't know, I don't even want to call it like active slights, but it was like but there was definitely this pretendness that was going on. I was pretending
Mhm.
that things hadn't happened in the past, that things weren't happening right now. And I just started to acknowledge what was here and see it in my friends as well. And that to me, like the shelter of that, being able to just come out and say, like, these are the things that have happened to me in the past, and what I have buried under shame in the past, and having that acceptance in that moment. I cannot even tell you. There have been things that I've talked to you and our other friends about that have transformed me, right? From just like this horrible little secret, or several, into, oh, I'm just a human, like I'm an okay human, like it's okay, and I can move forward. And that's the alchemy right there, right?
Absolutely. 100%. And I think the being seen. I talk about
Yes.
this with so many other women that to look at someone and say, I see you. There's no hiding. You're not hiding the shame, the feelings of failure, the how not knowing how to move forward in something, like all of that. And you're exactly right. It's part of a human experience, right?
Mhm.
That is that is now shared, right? How much of that do you think was part of as a result of the Me Too movement, and how much of that is a result of us being wise and mature women now in our 50s?
What a good question, because I don't know that the Me Too movement, that I could have gotten on board with that in my earlier years, right? Like
Mhm.
I was still, um there's this phrase that the young kids use, the pick me girl, right? And there was some version of that. There was some apologist in me still, as a younger person, as a younger woman growing up, that hadn't recognized all of the internalized misogyny that was, that I had grown myself, right? And
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 participated in,
so
actively
yes,
participated in.
yes,
Mhm.
yes. And so I think that, um the Me Too movement allowed us to have real honest conversations about experiences that pushed open doors that had stayed shut for a long time. Like the movement allowed everybody to participate who had these stories and who needed to say something. But our progress, our internalized, like, not internalized, our like introspection had allowed us to get to the point where we could nudge that door open a little bit wider and start to, and so it was kind of, um it happened in concert with each other, like the internal growth and the movement and the speaking out and the um trust in each other. All of that just kind of bloomed.
And as revolutionary as that was, it felt like that we still were holding on to. We have a mutual good friend, and she said during that time, I remember her saying, don't take that sexuality piece from me, because it's part of my ammunition. It's in my arsenal, right? It's a way that I gain access to rooms. It is a way that I garner favor by continuing to do that, right? To play the role that we had played for so long. To meaning, and when I say the role, for me personally and the women in my circle, it was making ourselves smaller. It was making our wants smaller, our desires smaller, our needs smaller. It was about centering men in every equation, right? And my God, and still like the unlearning of all. So it has been about unlearning more than about learning. For me personally, I can't speak for everybody else, but the door was kicked open with Me Too, and we kind of stood there like, well, what do we do now? Okay,
Yeah.
we've talked about all of this, and now what happens? Now what happens? And I think that we're still in that a little bit. We're still trying to figure out what this next part looks like, because I mean, we know that this patriarchy's got to go. It's not serving anybody. No one.
Nobody, nobody. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too because I think that growing up where I grew up, which was, kind of Midwest suburban white, kind of um, not particularly religious, but it was a very um, conservative environment, and there were not women who were forging this path, right? Women who were divorced or widowed and not remarried, or gay, like they were really marginalized and their voices were not honored, right?
Right.
And so what's interesting now is I think that there is at least among women and in the younger generations of women that I know, there is a real centering of the women's voice, right? And it's a movement towards that, right?
Yes.
And just like you said, like it's a process and it's the unlearning, but you're starting to think, oh, this is what this could look like for us in the future. It doesn't have to look like that, which has come before, which has always come before. Um, and that's to me really exciting because we have the opportunity, I think, to be pioneers in this space somehow.
Were there any moments along the way that you felt like were watershed moments that you were like, oh, we just like, and I'm thinking about this in terms of like the connection piece of it. Were there moments when you thought, oh, this was a before moment and an after moment, right? Like this, something changed, something shifted in your personal relationships, not necessarily in a global kind of the Me Too
Yeah.
movement happened and doors were kicked open and all of that. But like, were there personal moments that you were like, oh, okay, well, either like an awakening of your own where you were like, I'm done. I'm done doing X, Y, and Z. This is now a revelation and I don't have to do that anymore. Were there,
Yeah, I mean, I had this opportunity. So the timeline for me was that when COVID hit and everybody was locked indoors with their spouse, I was here with mine at the time. And I was looking around and I was like, oh, now everybody is as miserable as I have always been, right?
see,
And that was an important moment for me. And I ended up at one point, I was lucky enough, I knew somebody who lived on the vineyard. They had an empty home, and I got to go down and stay there for a month with my dog, just living. And so, the way the vineyard sounds all fancy, but this was not a fancy house. It was kind of in the middle of the woods. We'd take walks every morning, among the turkeys and the spiders and the sandhill cranes, like all of the wildlife. Um, and at the time, I was reading this book called Dance of the Dissident Daughter by Sue Monk Kidd. And that book really describes the divine feminine in a way. And I just had these moments of real connection with I don't know, just being in that moment, right? And feeling like, oh, I am on the path. This is the path. There is no going back from here. And when I returned to the city, I'd already kind of floated the idea that I was interested in a divorce. But when I got back to the city, I said to my then husband, I was like, that's it. We're absolutely done. And for him, it was a surprise.
always a
For
surprise.
me, it was for me, it was this clear evolution that
Mhm.
just had this moment. And I can remember being on the vineyard and doing one of my morning, dawn walks with the dog and seeing all of these spider webs dripped in dew and finding this um a fox skull wedged in a tree. Like there was so many magical moments that I remember thinking, this is really important. Like I have to remember this. And gathered acorns and oak leaves and all sorts of stuff just to like try to anchor. And then I went home and I got a tattoo of it on my arm because
Okay.
I was like, I have to remember how important it is to stay anchored in the feminine divine and in like what is my truth. Absolutely. So yeah, that was absolutely a turning point. I mean, I've had several since then, but that was the most, well, one of the more kind of profound moments that I've had.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that whole time, I think it's interesting about like the evolution of what connection feels like now versus what connection felt like before COVID. And even
Hmm. Hmm.
I do think that the Me Too, I mean, there's more unpacking to do there, certainly with the Me Too movement and what a watershed moment that was. But I do think that COVID really redefined what connection could look like, right? It is because we were so siloed we were so isolated and we were online all the time, these communities were created as a result of it. Now, I'm somebody that I absolutely love the energy of other people. I want to be in that energy. I want to share that energy. I love a face to face. Entertaining in my home is one of my very favorite things to do. Sharing cocktails, of course, all of the things, right? Group cooked dinners, those are, we love to do those. We know that when we all get together. But I do think that when we when COVID happened and those online communities started, I do think that there was a shift about where we could find connection and how we could be seen in different ways, right?
Yep.
So I think that as a result of that training, I think that we're kind of still there, even though the world kind of went back to normal, whatever that looks like. Um, I think that those online communities still are alive and well. And I also think that for me personally, it completely shaped how I view being out in the world, how I feel about being in crowds, how I feel like I have anxiety about it. Like I can do it for a little bit, but I am not doing it every night. I cannot go out and be out in the world. Like I don't know. It was a really big shift when all that happened. But now I know that my feelings of connection have gone from I like the big group, I like all of the things to I would way rather have one person on my porch. Can we be in jammies on my porch and just, share a whiskey and talk? That feels like way more connection to me. But there is a
Yeah.
cost for all of it. And I think
Yeah.
we're at this place right now where we don't know how much we're willing to pay for it. So I think that it becomes easier to be online and siloed and isolated while we're connecting online in these online communities than it does to go out and like pay the emotional cost that it is to be out. I don't know. You have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do. I see it in two ways, right? My daughter is now nearly 25 years old, and she wants to be out in the world. She wants to be surrounded by humans. And I don't have that need anymore. I 100% agree. I want to be in a comfortable caftan with
That's right.
house shoes on and
Mhm.
and like not not jostling for space at a bar and not shouting to be heard, right? So there are things around that I think are just like a part of our process. um but I also agree that there is something that really did shift. And I don't like people call it broken, but I'm not sure I'm prepared to say it like that. I feel like it's a muscle that fell out of tune. Like we've strained our social ankle and we need to nurse it back to health, right? In a
Oh, I like that.
sense.
Yeah.
Um, I had a really profound dream the other day in which I have a girlfriend who is a rabbi uh in San Francisco. And in my dream, she came to me in my dream and she said, "You understand that being with your friends right now is the most important thing. And it really, that message was not about like being in a gigantic room with 50 other people and like trying to figure out like how do you get into this conversation, or like they're dancing over there, I want to do that. It was really about that intentional attention that we can give one another in an intimate kind of setting, right? Where we are sitting on a porch and listening to the rain or talking about the things that really matter. And I woke up from that and I was like, okay, I got it.
Mhm.
Right. And so, but I do also think that we can take advantage of these technologies to
Mhm.
bridge this gap, because otherwise, you and I haven't seen each other since 2022,
Mhm.
right? I think that's when it was.
That's right. In person. Yeah.
Right. And so, and otherwise like without this kind of opportunity or other apps and technologies that we use, it would be very difficult to stay in touch and to be able to continue to have the conversations that we have. Because, like sometimes when you haven't seen somebody in a while, you're like, well, I painted my house last year. And like, that's all you have to say, because everything else feels too maybe
So
vulnerable or,
much, right? Well,
right, right.
if you're not in, I mean, I think again, I'm a technology fan, and we have a video sharing app that we use that we love so
Mhm.
much, and I cannot fathom not having that technology, because I do get to be involved in the day to day of my girls, right? And anybody else, that it's those moments of intimacy are hard. It is. There's no place to go if you haven't seen or talked to somebody in 5 years. And you're, well, I painted my house. That's garden looks good. That's that's the extent of it, right? But if you're involved in the day to day, you get to say, "Hey, how was the vet visit with Gus? Was he okay? Did it,
Yeah, 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 exactly,
did the cat
exactly.
sore foot end up okay?" I mean, it's all that. So,
Yeah. I also think there's a way in which the clock strikes again. I use that same app to have asynchronous discussions with my brother
mm,
that would be very hard to have over the phone. But
right.
somehow when you're not saying it like eye to eye, you can get to a deeper level with somebody who might be a little bit avoidant or a little bit scared,
Mm-hmm.
and still put it out there like how much you love them. And that
Mm-hmm.
I think is also important. So
Absolutely.
it's a really like it's a lovely bridge.
It is. I agree. I worry that my only concern about the whole technology piece is that we have, and I definitely see it with younger generations, that we a dopamine hit is not the same thing as an interaction. A
Yeah.
like on a page is not the same thing as a conversation. They're
Yeah.
just different. And I don't want us to lose the thread of how important that interaction is, how important it is to be.
Without these technologies, like I would not have some of the intimacy that I have with friends who live a world away, and um the opportunities that I have to explain myself in detail and to have them hear that and listen to it and say it back to me with a different lens has offered an opportunity for growth that I don't think that I would have had in a situation, where you call. I, I'm thinking a lot about my aunt. My mother passed away in 23, and this is my kind of last remaining elder. And I call her, and we have limited things to talk about, in part because again, it's like that, oh, I painted the house, or my neighbor came over and shoveled the snow, or whatever kind of conversation, which is lovely, but I need more than that. Like that's not really a relationship to me. I need for it to be a real relationship, I need to be able to say with vulnerability, this is an issue in my life and I'm really struggling to make heads and tails of it. And when you hear me say it, what do you think about it? And have somebody else just walk through it with their lens. And they could have major facts of the case wrong. It kind of doesn't matter. Just having somebody hear you and say it from a different perspective just offers me just a little bit of distance
Mhm.
from the problem itself, and that distance is where the grace happens. That's where the
Mm.
growth can happen, right?
Mhm.
And that's what binds you together a little bit more and like offers you the the power of that connection, because that's really what it is. It's really not like, I mean, it really is that for
Mhm.
me.
I agree. I'm with you there. I think that the the intimacy of that, I think as I get older, I am really only interested in those relationships. Like surface is
Yep.
exhausting to me.
It
I'm not
is.
interested in it. I don't like, I can make small talk and that's great, but I'm not going to do it very long. And I really just want to have the talks. I want to talk about what is really going on, like
Yeah.
talk to me about your heart story. Talk to me about what's happening with your kid. Like those are the things that I want to hear. And I don't know, they are the moments now that feel the most genuine and intimate to me, are those moments when we're sharing the vulnerabilities, right? That's where our superpower lies. That's where our strength lies, is in sharing those vulnerabilities and offering each other grace through those moments. Because that being seen in those moments, it shapes how we move forward. It shapes how we show up in the world and how we show up in other relationships, how we show up for our kids and our spouses and our partners and all of those things. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I'm thinking right now about like I am one of those people who has an estranged relationship with her father, right? Like we haven't spoken in almost 5 years. And the reason why, I'm sure that he would tell you it's a political thing. It is not. The reason why is because we could never get out of the um you know the weather today is rainy, or I have to drive to Yakima today, or whatever, like, and really like that surface level relationship
Mhm.
was exhausting, dispiriting, frustrating, like I and trying to make the connection over and over again resulted in depression almost, right? And frankly, when our relationship did hit some skids, we didn't have enough of that social equity, if you will, that trust equity, to be able to bridge it. Like, he said X, I'm sure he didn't mean that with all of the force that he said it with, right?
Mhm.
Like, that's what you give to a person with whom you've had these stronger conversations, or these moments when you've been able to be vulnerable with each other and show each other love,
Mhm.
right? That's where, because you always get into a moment, like people get into moments, we're humans, we make mistakes,
That's
right?
right.
It's that repair that makes it important.
Mhm.
And when it just kind of becomes ultra challenging because there is no reserve to draw upon, that's where the problem lies. And so like I've ended up in a part of my life where I don't have a really important relationship in my life, because I won't do those kind of surface level things. Certainly not going to go to bars and do that. I'm not going to just like have like meaningless conversation with people and think that it's connection, if I'm willing to also say that's not enough in this really critical role
Mhm.
in my life for me.
Mhm. Girl, this is we could talk about this for hours. I
I know.
literally, I'm not going to hold my viewers hostage with this, because this is another episode when we start talking
Yeah.
about having hard conversations. But um I appreciate you so much being here tonight, and I, as always, appreciate your sisterhood more than I can even articulate, and just feel so held and loved and seen when we're together. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate you taking time out of your night to do this too. This was
My
always
pleasure.
good.
It's
That's
very
right. I know
exciting.
we can get in caftans and kimonos anytime and have some whiskey and talk. That's our favorite things. I know we're gonna have a compound one day. It's gonna be amazing.
It's
Um,
gonna be amazing. It's gonna be great. Can't wait.
I know, and that's the other thing we could. That's a whole other episode too, right? How many people are like, we're just gonna live in a compound together? That's what we're doing. That's all we're doing anymore. Yeah,
Exactly.
just wanting to be
Yep.
surrounded by people that love us. I know, I know. Life is hard, girl, for sure. All right, well, I love you very much. Thank you so much for
Thank
everything,
you.
and I appreciate all of you tuning in for our very first episode of Spirit and Soul. So, if there anything that you want to hear more about, if any questions that you have, we would love for you to be a part of the conversation. Feel free to like and subscribe and share away. And we will see you all next time. Cheers, y'all. And we'll talk to you soon.